We have one of the most exciting fights on this card coming up between a couple of guys that maybe the casual UFC fan hasn't heard of, and Randy Costa and Journey Newson. And I'm here to tell you that there's a lot to be excited for, despite what these guys' records are. I mean, you look at Journey Newson, 9-2 with the 1-0 contest. You might think, geez, a no contest against Domingo Plarte. What was that? Let me tell you what, Matt. Let's go back to that fight. Now, I'm not going to do a Fight Night Picks throwback, but I will say I had Plarte to win that fight. Journey Newson went in there coming out hot as all heck, getting the first round knockout. Now, that fight was overturned due to a positive test in Texas because he tested positive for the weed. And it's insane that that's
performance enhancing.
That's something that overturns a win to a no contest, but you can't take away the fact that he won that fight in impressive fashion. So he's coming in here taking on Randy Costa. Now, the Northeastern fans might be familiar with Costa, a guy that trains out of Lozon's. We've seen Mike Rodriguez from Lozon's have success in the UFC recently. We've seen Lozon find success. We've also seen, of course, Calvin Kattar as well. Now, Randy Costa came into the UFC. A, the nickname the Zohan, that was a terrible movie. But B, his wins weren't over the best competition. I mean, we're talking binary, the ones and O's and O's and ones and all of that stuff, but a lot of first round finishes. So he comes in and takes on Brandon Davis, and that's a tough fight. I mean, Brandon Davis didn't have the best run in the UFC, and you know what? I would hazard to guess that someday soon we'll see Brandon Davis back in the UFC. He's one of those guys that I think we will, just like a former common opponent type of guy, Northeastern guy, Kyle Bochniak. Bring Bochniak back. He put on fun fights, but Randy Costa lost that one. All right, that's going to happen. So he comes back out and he has a tough test against Boston Solomon. Boston, where are you at? We were waiting on him to make his UFC debut. Randy Costa looked amazing in that fight. And I mean, listen, Sean West had a good fight against Boston Solomon until he illegally struck him in one of the worst illegal strikes I've ever seen with LFA. But Boston Solomon, I mean, that's a pretty decent win. It's a good win. It's a stepping stone. It's an opportunity to fight a guy like Journey Newson. Matt, this is such a fun fight stylistically because Newson, when it's in close, he throws so hard for 135 pounds. Randy Costa, incredibly long for this division. Like one of the longest fighters you're going to find outside of what? The guy that we saw in our last fight, in Andre Ewell. So I'm excited for this one. It is a classic. Fight Night Pick Strikers Paradise. What do you make of this one?
This is a fight that I can almost guarantee you is going to be over in the first round. And I barely know who to predict. There's my Matt Allen hot take of this week. Normally,
going with the under.
Exactly. Normally I have a really bad lock of the week and it's wrong, but this is at least my fight of the night, or at least performance of the night pick, because it's probably going to be over quick. Like you would say, Journey Newson, hand speed is the name of the game with him. He reminds me a little bit of a smaller Melvin Gillard, if you will. Now, not really to the same echelon of like a prime Melvin Gillard, but he's just really good boxing, really good at getting in and out of the space. The issue is he's really hittable on his way in, and when he throws punches, he kind of leaves his hands open a little bit, so he's open to take shots. Randy Costa, it's not often you have a guy with only 4 fights coming into the UFC and people are excited for his debut. And I apologize for not knowing the name, but his best friend who had passed away, who always brings her the picture up, that brought a lot of hype. He didn't go his way, but again, you lose to Brandon Davis in your UFC debut. There's no shame in that. I get it, Brandon Davis no longer with the UFC, but
he fought Zabit one time. Remember that?
And he's got a good skill set. You can't look at him as the fighter and be like, oh, he's not a solid fighter. And Costa even had him hurt in that fight. He dropped him early in the first round, and it was a really back-and-forth war until he ended up getting submitted. And the fight against Boston Solomon, he just kind of flatlined him pretty quick. There wasn't that much to learn from it. But the only thing we do know is these guys both have bricks in their hands. They both have a lot of finishing ability, and I don't really think we're going to see too much of the ground game between either guy. I think Costa's probably more likely to take it to the ground if Newsom is starting to get off some good combos on the feet. But I'm really excited for this fight. I do think Costa, he's going to be able to, keep range. And when it comes in close, he's got really nice uppercuts and elbows too. So I just think that his tools are kind of almost set up to beat a guy like Journey Newsom, who's a smaller guy who's going to have to close the range a lot.
Two really fun prospects that I like out of the Northeast, and I liken them just a little bit, and it's odd. It's one of those in my mind's eye type of things. Randy Costa and Sean Brady, two guys that I think will find a lot of success as they move forward. I know Brady has, twice as many fights at this time, but as they move on, I can't wait to see their progression in the UFC. Two totally different weight classes as well, but this is where this fight takes an odd turn. If you look over on Tapology to 717 votes, 76% of voters going with Costa, 64% predicting a knockout win for Costa. the biggest shift in the odds, a 54% shift over on best fight odds. And if you look at the averages, Journey Newson opened as a plus 155 and automatically that line dropped to a minus 140. And it stayed pretty well consistent as this week's gone on. You look at Costa, open as a minus 180, now at a plus 115. That makes me scratch my head. Is there something somebody knew off the bat that we don't know? Or were these odds just so mismatched that all of a sudden somebody just sniped right in there and picked them? It's a really weird one. I know, again, you look at it, hindsight being 2020, yeah, I should have picked Journey Newson against Domingo Plarte. Plarte was a long fighter for the Division 2, and he was exposed by Newson. And that's probably the thinking in this instance. I think Randy Costa, again, is a really good prospect. He's going to get into a situation at some point where he's going to be fighting one of those, not gatekeepers, but one of those really good regional fighters like we saw. Yeah, it's easy to pick it out, but Kevin Kroom against Roosevelt Roberts, a guy like a Derek Minner. There's all sorts of fighters like that along the way that either you pass that test, you move on to the next, or you got to fight some more of those lower ranked or lower tiered fighters. So in this fight, I'm going to go with Randy Costa. Again, I think, like you had mentioned, the length, the pop at the end of his shots, and overall, a really high ceiling for both guys. But I think Randy Costa in this one, there's more attributes that I definitely like here. And I'm going to go with Costa, who's now the underdog.
It's odd, too, because, you can kind of reference the last fight between Andre Ewell and Irwin Rivera. You have a really long fighter with good power against a fighter with good power who has to close that distance. And we saw it. What's a good example? Verdum against Stipe. Stipe, yes, he hits hard, but if you're walking into the shot and he hits you, he's going to put you down. So I see that's how the fight's going to go. I don't see it going all 3 rounds. I think it will be wild for as long as it lasts, but I do have Randy Costa in this one.
Matt, we like the under in this one more than we like the pick, but we're both going with Randy Costa to get the win. I'm really excited about this card. We've got an extended look at our main event between Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley, so you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.